I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. It suddenly seems as if Donald Trump has turned against India and no longer cares about Washington's relationship with New Delhi. Is that the right way of viewing the sudden but sharp downturn in the relationship? What's brought it about? Can it be easily reversed? Or do we have to wait 3.5 years for the Trump presidency to end before the relationship improves? Those are the key issues I shall raise today with one of America's foremost scholars on South Asia, a senior fellow at the Stimson Centre, Daniel Markey. Dr. Markey joins me live from Washington, D.C. Daniel Markey, let me start with the question that many in India are asking. Has Trump got it in for India? He slapped 50% tariffs on the country. He suspended trade talks till the tariff dispute is resolved. He says he doesn't care if India's dead economy continues to sink. And then Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, has said India is threatening America's national security by buying Russian oil. Does all of this suggest India has fallen out of favor?
Well, it sure is a sharp about face from where the relationship was at the very outset of the Trump administration, of the second Trump administration. Certainly early on when he hosted Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of friendliness, a lot of sort of personal interaction that looked very positive, as well as a lot of promise of a policy breakthrough on trade and a continuation of many of the projects that the United States and India have had underway for decades. And now all of this, you're right, looks to be in some jeopardy. Why exactly is a longer story that I hope we can get into. But I think the bottom line is this president, our president, doesn't feel like the trade negotiations have gotten to where he wanted them to be. So he's upset about that. He's clearly eager to take credit for the ceasefire between India and Pakistan that your prime minister doesn't want to allow him to take credit for. And so there's a political difference over that. And there seems to be, at least reportedly, to have been some somewhat acrimonious or at least uncomfortable phone calls between the two of them. And of course, our president rules in a very personalized manner. And so if in fact that's true, then that sort of frustration that he might have had directly with the person of Narendra Modi could play into the wider relationship. So you see a number of things at work that are eating at the relationship, which I would have to say, sitting here in Washington, D.C., most of them are completely surprising. I would not have expected to be here.
Forgive me, tell me a bit more about these acrimonious phone calls between Trump and Modi, because that would come as news to the entire Indian audience hearing you today.
Well, it's not entirely new. It's not new from me. It has been reported. I think maybe Bloomberg or Reuters has reported this, but there seems to have been a lengthy phone call in which Prime Minister Modi expressed some kind of frustration or wanted to set the record straight on what actually unfolded between India and Pakistan back in May. And apparently President Trump wasn't having any of it and did not want to hear the prime minister's versions of events, but the prime minister persisted, apparently, and this left a very bitter taste in Trump's mouth. And there is some reason to believe that that led to an unraveling of what was already a contentious trade negotiation, which probably wasn't going nearly as far as the president in his dreams would have hoped that India would get to, but which most people had told him and his staff and others were unlikely demands on India, given India's lengthy history of protectionism and concerns about its own economy.
Tell me, would this phone call be a phone call that happened when Narendra Modi was in Canada for the G7? And it said in India that at that time when the president spoke to him, because the president, as you know, left Canada early and went back to Washington, and the president apparently invited Modi to break journey in Washington on his way back home, which Modi, according to the Indian side, politely declined. Is that the possible phone call you're referring to?
It might have been. I don't actually know.
Okay. Now, there is a view, and maybe this is part of the explanation, that Trump is using India to send a message to China and Russia. In the process, India clearly seems to have become collateral damage. But that also means he doesn't really care any longer about what happens to India. To what extent do you think this reflects the truth?
I think, look, it's very difficult to get into the mind of our president and to impose on his actions a consistent set of strategies or even policies that all fit together. And so I'm inclined not to. I'm inclined to see his behavior as being more piecemeal and tactical than sort of part of a broader strategy in which U.S.-China strategy and U.S.-Russia strategy and U.S.-India strategy are all together, or even, as you put it, that India would be kind of used as a means to send a message. I think there is a direct relationship with India. I think there are reasons why at this moment he's frustrated on the trade front. I think that's pretty clear and maybe can get resolved. I think that there are broader concerns right now at this particular moment that he has on Russia and Ukraine, and he's trying to push some kind of a deal there. And so, yes, maybe India is a victim of that in the near term. And then, of course, the India-Pakistan thing is something that came pretty much out of nowhere to the Trump administration and which he has been inclined to want to take credit for. So when you put those pieces together, and then back to the China piece, I would just say you have a looming and unresolved China policy where it's not clear just how much India will fit into that at all. Everybody's waiting to see exactly where the Trump administration will come down on China. Put all those pieces together and you end up in this, as I say, unexpected spot with India.
You know, let's pick up for a moment on Trump's developing relationship with Pakistan. To many in India, it suddenly looks as if he's fallen in love with Islamabad. He's only imposed 19% tariffs. He considers Pakistan, or America at any rate, considers Pakistan a phenomenal partner against counterterrorism. The president invited Field Marshal Munir to lunch. And finally, America is going to help Pakistan prospect for oil. And Trump even taunted India and said it's quite possible that one day Pakistan will be selling oil to India. So is Pakistan the new belle of the ball?
I think that Pakistan is making the most of all of the opportunities that have suddenly and again unexpectedly come its way. I think that I know that Pakistan had been frustrated and anxious under the Biden administration, where they felt that their diplomatic relationship with Washington was severely diminished and they were in the doghouse for 4 years. And so they were eager, as Trump came in, to find any and every way, every option that they could pursue, fair or foul, to court this new president. And I think it's worked. And exactly why is a bit of a parlor game here in Washington. You know, which piece of it? Is it oil? Is it critical minerals? Is it counterterrorism? Is it cyber? Is it some grand plan for Pakistani troops in the Middle East? Is it something else entirely, weaning Pakistan off of China? We don't know exactly, but some combination of these things through a variety of means of outreach, including, as you pointed out, a direct interaction between the Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, and our president, seems to be working for the moment. Whether or not this will persist, I think is really an important question. Pakistan, it seems, has made a lot of promises And some of them seem, at least to me, unrealistic about the prospects for oil or critical minerals and actually seeing the United States realize those benefits in any kind of near term. But Pakistan may be able to string this along in ways that serve its narrow purposes and maybe serve our president's narrow purposes as well. And so that is a real about face as well.
Now, in 48 hours' time on Friday, Trump and Putin are due to meet in Alaska. There's an awful lot of hope in India that if they reach a deal that leads to a ceasefire in Ukraine, that outcome could provide relief to Delhi. First of all, do you think there is a direct connection between the two? And secondly, if the two don't reach a deal, what would that mean for Delhi?
Right. So the 25% additional punitive tariff on Delhi could conceivably go away very rapidly if the Trump administration believes that it's making some kind of progress with Putin. So I wouldn't rule that out. And I think our president has a variety of political and other incentives to suggest that he's making progress with Putin, even if that progress is limited or temporary, ephemeral. So I think India has good reason to hope, at least in the relative near term, that 25% additional tariff will go away. Whether the president can actually make progress on Ukraine and resolving it in a way that somehow addresses almost impossible differences between Ukraine and Russia and addresses the concerns and anxieties of the Europeans and meets a political measure here in the United States. Look, I would be among a much larger chorus of American commentators who would say this seems quite unlikely, but we can't rule it out. And the fact that he's having direct conversations with Putin means that that he's at least hopeful he'll make some progress.
So if there's no progress, that means that additional 25% penalty stays exactly where it is.
Yeah, if he is rebuffed, humiliated, if something comes out of this that looks terrible for President Trump personally and politically, then I think India will continue to pay a price for that.
Let's for a moment focus on the Russian oil issue, both because it rankles with New Delhi, but also because Trump has made it crystal clear that until it's resolved, there will be no talks regarding trade negotiations. Now, the truth is, the Biden administration was encouraging India to buy Russian oil. This is what Eric Garcetti, the American ambassador in Delhi, said in May 2024. Actually, they, meaning India, bought Russian oil because we, the United States, wanted somebody to buy Russian oil at a price cap. Because as a commodity, we didn't want oil prices going up. And they, India, fulfilled that. Today, Trump is deliberately ignoring his predecessor's policy and blaming India instead.
Yeah, look, a couple of points on this. One would be, I think, with due respect to Ambassador Garcetti, that was a kind of post hoc justification for U.S. policy. There was frustration in Washington about India or anyone else buying Russian oil at cheaper prices, keeping the Russian economy afloat. Once they started to peel it back, they realized that, yes, they could kind of make a virtue out of this to suggest that Russia was making less on its oil and India was keeping global fuel prices relatively lower. And so they made the best of it. But I think it would be wrong to suggest that this was a kind of a U.S. intention from the start. It's something that kind of evolved as India reflected its own deep need for energy and sort of demonstrated that by buying cheaper Russian oil, it was actually good in a way for everyone. It certainly didn't relieve or it did relieve some pressure on Russia, which undermined some of the initial U.S. goals for sanctions against Russia. Now, flipping to a broader point, though, when President Trump uses tariffs on India in this way, this is a reflection of his belief that tariffs are an exceptionally useful tool of global pressure. And so arguments that come out of India about global oil markets, about the rationality of keeping certain prices higher or lower, and how others are buying this oil from India after India has refined it, including in Europe. those kinds of arguments don't actually work that well. What he's trying to do is use this as a cudgel, not just against India, but to indirectly use it against Moscow. And so the economic logics are not what's really driving this. It's a political leverage, a tool of leverage that he believes that he personally can wield in ways that are quite powerful. So that's what's going on, and I think India needs to appreciate that.
Okay, I understand your point. Let me put something else to you. Isn't Trump also being hypocritical? America continues to import palladium, uranium hexafluoride, fertilizers and chemicals, all from Russia. And the Indian Express has pointed out that the quantity that America has imported this year already has exceeded what it did last year. So if America can import from Russia and not be accused of fueling Russia's war, why can't India import?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said earlier, consistency is not something that we tend to accuse President Trump of. There is a certain hypocrisy in all of this. As I say, tariffs are his favored tool of pressure. He sees them as powerful in this moment on the eve of a conversation with Putin. The timing has aligned in this certain way. If he had a broader strategy of really squeezing the Russians that included cutoffs of U.S. purchases of various items, or reducing even European indirect purchases of Russian oil and so on, or putting pressure on China, we would see that in so many different ways. We're not seeing that. We're seeing him grasping at easy tools that are closest at hand. And this is one of them. So the stars have aligned in a way that redounds to India's disadvantage. But this may be kind of a temporary tactic, not some broader and deeper, well thought through strategy.
There is a view in India that he's picking on India because India is an easy target and he knows he can get away with it. For instance, he hasn't threatened China or Turkey, though they are the largest and third largest importers of Russian oil. He hasn't threatened Hungary and Slovakia, which are two European countries that continue to import Russian oil. Nor has he threatened Japan, which since June has been importing Russian oil. Yet he's single-mindedly focused on India, and at the same time, he's just extended the trade truce with China for another 90 days.
Yeah. Look, is he focused on India per se because India is weak or vulnerable? There is a way to pursue this logic. That is, one sitting here in Washington would say, well, what can India do about it? And this flips the logic that I think had been held in many people's minds, that especially in New Delhi, that the United States needed India more than India needs the United States. And this really sort of plays against that line of reasoning. And maybe exposes, yes, India's vulnerabilities. But why picking on India? As I said before, I think it's because it happens that the trade negotiations had not gone well, and that we were in a place, or not as well as President Trump had hoped, and then we were in a place where this was fresh in his mind. His frustration, as I said, over interactions with Modi and with respect to his claims of success in the India-Pakistan conflict, all of these things came together in a way that left a big threat against India right there on the table where he could pick it up and use it, he thought, maybe in a way that would be helpful. That is not true, for instance, on China, where the situation is much more tenuous, where, as I said before, it is unclear what Trump's larger game plan with China actually is. But it is clear, the one thing that is clear is that he intends to address that somewhere a little bit further down the line, within months. And he doesn't want to do anything to upset those negotiations before they reach a further point. But with India, the negotiations had reached a stalemate. And so he's frustrated. And so if you're frustrated, he felt he could lash out in this way. That's my attempt to unravel it. But there may be more than meets the eye.
Isn't there a further difference between the Chinese position and the Indian situation? China clearly has key ingredients that America cannot do without. I'm talking about rare earth minerals, metals, and magnets. There's nothing that India exports to America that America can't do without. So China has leverage. India is lacking that leverage.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying in terms of India being more vulnerable. It is difficult to see where India can push back against the United States in quite as painful ways as the United States can push on India. So the relationship is asymmetrical. India is more dependent or vulnerable than the United States is. And with respect to China, the relationship, at least economically, is in some ways, I wouldn't say reversed, but it's more even. And it is clear that the Chinese can create pain for the United States in innumerable ways, including because China provides so much in the way of material that leads into the United States in every possible way. Everything we have here seems to be in some way connected to China. So that's difficult to disentangle. So yes, the relationship is asymmetrical with India and very different from with China.
So against this background, Daniel Markey, and as someone who's closely analyzed India-US relations, let me ask you, how do you think India would be best advised to respond, not just to the Trump tariffs, but to the wider deterioration in the relationship? Should it grit its teeth and wait for better times, bearing in mind that better times may not come for 3.5 years? Or should it find a way of resisting and fighting back, even though it's hard to say what it could do on that line?
I struggle with this question, and I'm certainly not in the business normally of advising India on India's policy, but more likely trying to analyze how India might respond. Look, I think the whole world, including some of the United States' historically closest allies and partners, are all wondering something similar. The Trump administration is overthrowing past practice on trade policy globally and making everybody's life, including Canada, Mexico, the UK, everybody is struggling with this. How do you get through it? I would say in the near term, though, India has almost no choice but to grit its teeth and buckle down and attempt to get back to some kind of a negotiating strategy that will sort of get the relationship back on track. There are too many deeply felt interests, real interests on both sides that want to see that happen to simply walk away from this relationship now. So
then, sorry, please carry on.
I would just say in the very near term, a quiet, disciplined, professional, diplomatic approach, which is, I think, what we're seeing out of New Delhi, frankly, is the wisest course of action. It's frankly the only course of action because big business and leaders like Narendra Modi have invested a lot in this relationship. So to walk away now would be to throw away those investments. So they don't need to precisely double down, but they do need to explore every option on the table to get things back on track. That's what I see happening right now.
In which case, let me ask you, is there a constituency in America that is willing to stand up for India, that is willing to tell President Trump, you're making a terrible mistake?
I think broadly, India is one of those countries that certainly in Washington, D.C., and I think more widely across the United States, has enjoyed bipartisan favor in American politics. And so in some ways, that's why Trump's behavior has been so surprising. Pakistan, for instance, is not popular in Washington, doesn't have a significant set of champions on Capitol Hill, a major caucus, or a widely felt affection across the American electorate in major cities, major donors, anything like that. India does. India enjoys a tremendous sort of affection in so many different ways. And that's why Trump's behavior is a little bit out of character for most of what we had seen in terms of American politics for a very long time. So I think India maybe can't rely on that in the immediate moment, because it is difficult here in Washington, even for champions of India, to figure out how best to get the president's ear. But maybe if they can hold on for a time, they'll find their way back into something of a more workable relationship, and then possibly over a longer period of time, something better than that.
Let me ask you, not so long ago, in fact, right up till Operation Sindoor began, the view in Delhi was that there was a fairly close friendship and understanding between Trump and Modi. Now, when you look back on it, was that a mistaken or at least an exaggerated view?
I don't think it was mistaken. I mean, I watched the two when Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to Washington. I watched their body language as closely as I could. I saw genuinely positive sentiment on Trump's part. We had seen a number of their interactions in the past. So if you're just looking at kind of leader to leader level relations, they seemed generally and genuinely positive, as much as can be the case. And I think beyond that, Vice President Vance's trip to India was a success. Almost every other aspect of the relationship seemed to be going as well as in prior administrations. And so this about face, isn't one that I would have anticipated, because we could see fissures underneath or a deep actual animosity. I think the India-Pakistan conflict brought out, and Operation Sindoor brought out a deeper difference between them in, again, unexpected ways, but it is now real and shouldn't be underestimated. There'll have to be some attempt to resolve that, what seems to be bad blood between the two leaders. But the good news there is, Trump seems to have a short memory. So one day you're in his bad books, and if circumstances change, you can find yourself in a very different spot not long after. We saw what happened with Zelensky. He came to Washington, got a huge browbeating in the White House. Now seems to have found his way back into a somewhat better place. We'll see what the end of this week brings. But in other words, circumstances with Trump can change radically and unexpectedly.
There is speculation on the front page of today's Indian Express that the Prime Minister, when he visits the United Nations at the end of September, might seek a bilateral one-to-one meeting with President Trump. Do you believe that would be a wise and sensible thing to do, or is it too early for that?
I think that it could be a wise and sensible thing to do, but I think we're going to need to see how things play out over the next couple of weeks. And there, going back to your questions about what might happen if we see a breakthrough with Russia and so on. So if we see some positive movement on that front, if we see Trump relent on the additional 25% punitive tariff on India, then I think maybe the table will be set for a short meeting and interaction to kind of clear the air. And that will be very positive, because the concern right now is that the next major interaction between them is slated to be in November for the Quad summit. And at the present moment, it's conceivable that Trump wouldn't even go, or if he did go, that it might not go that well. So we'd like to see, I think anybody who's sort of rooting for an improved U.S.-India relationship, I think would prefer to see something get resolved, or at least stabilized in the relationship before that, so that the Quad summit can move forward.
If he doesn't come for Quad, and the betting is he probably won't,
yeah.
A, where does that leave Quad? And B, what does that mean about America's Indo-Pacific strategy? That strategy brought a lot of comfort and assurance to India vis-a-vis India's own problems with China. But now is the policy of building up India as a bulwark against China simply history?
Look, now you're getting at what is the fundamental question for the Trump administration's global strategy, which is, where does it actually stand on China? And this has repercussions for, everyone in Asia, as well as, most of the rest of the world. And we simply have a massive question mark in that space right now. It is plausible to imagine that the Trump administration, or at least the president himself, would like to craft some kind of a big breakthrough deal with China that would get us further away from the kind of a competitive, the Chinese would say containment strategy, or at least counterbalancing strategy against China. And that will leave countries like India probably anxious about just how much the United States would invest in them as a part of a counterbalance. If the United States, as I'm saying, would be willing to create a lot of space for China in Asia, if the Trump administration is going to back down off of competition with China, that's a fundamentally different world. And the reality at this moment, as we're speaking, is that we cannot know for sure where Trump is on that. We thought we knew. I think we were pretty clear on where the Biden administration stood. The previous Trump administration had come down pretty firmly in a competitive posture against China, but it's a new day. And so we have to wait for that. But until that space is filled in, enormous uncertainty, not just in India, but imagine Taiwan, Japan, the rest of Asia, huge question marks there as well. So that's what we're waiting to see.
But although we don't know where the Trump administration will come down vis-a-vis China, the fact that there are these critical questions unanswered hanging in the air must surely mean that India has very good reason to be anxious and worried.
Yes, India does, and others have good reasons to be anxious and worried. We're seeing a certain type of revision of the global economic order already through tariffs. And it is at least conceivable that President Trump will attempt a similarly, I would say, revolutionary revision in a global political order as well. But we don't know. And I would be reading tea leaves to suggest that I can guess what he wants, and beyond that, not just what he wants, but what he could actually get. There is a question, even if he was willing to make a deal with the Chinese, would it be a deal that they would take, and what would that actually look like? So we wait and see. But yes, anxiety is realistic and legitimate.
We don't know whether he can strike a deal with the Chinese or what sort of deal it will be. But what we do know is that he's already begun speculating fairly openly and publicly about the possibility of a summit with Xi Jinping towards the end of the year. That clearly suggests that his inclination is to actually be on the same page as China, not necessarily the same page as Delhi.
Yeah. But what I would say is, the first order of business with China is still trade and global economic relations. And so that is clearly top of mind for President Trump. What is less clear, and I think he thinks he can get a deal, and I think that he thinks that he can cap that deal in a one-on-one meeting with Xi Jinping, and that's his goal, and that he's setting expectations for that. But how exactly that economic relationship will then fit into his strategy for competition, or potentially some move toward a more cooperative geopolitical relationship with China, that again is unclear. And that doesn't have to be resolved before a meeting with Xi Jinping. He has to be able to get along well enough to meet with him, to come to some economic terms. But whether that kind of shifts gears over at the Pentagon, the rest of the US government, national security bureaucracy, away from sharp competition where the Biden administration was going, whether that shifts our policies on access to certain technologies, including, high-end chips and so on, very unclear to me, and seems to me less likely, but possible. And so that's what, still uncertain there.
Tell me, is there any possibility, I won't say likelihood, just possibility, that if the meeting with Putin goes badly and Trump walks out bruised, if he finds that inflation is itching up but steadily going up and up in America because of his tariffs, that he might be forced by public pressure in America to rethink?
Yes, these are possible. I would say the former is more possible than the latter. That is, rethinking Russia's strategy, if he is snubbed or rebuffed by Putin, seems quite plausible. Remember that many Republicans in Trump's party favor a more hawkish approach to Russia anyway. And so that would be a reversion back to a kind of a norm. On trade and tariffs, I think he's in for the long haul, and I think he's already made changes that are radical enough that they will bring about a certain amount of pain, and are bringing about a great deal of uncertainty in the U.S. economy as well. And that is clearly unpopular, and he'll pay some price for that. But that's going to be a whole lot harder to walk back. It cuts to the core of his political message. It would mean a fundamental revision of who Trump is as a politician at this point, and everything that he's been preaching, through the campaign and so on. It's not impossible simply because he is so flexible as a politician. That is, what exactly his principles are, have varied widely over his career. So it's not something I can totally rule out, but it seems much harder, and I think it would take much longer, and I think it will require a lot more pain and bruising, including probably losing the midterm elections over it. and then we'll see.
In which case, let me end the interview by asking, do you see India-US relations recovering during the remaining 3.5 years of the Trump presidency? Or will there be small marginal improvement, but for a significant improvement, we might well have to wait till the end of his term?
Yeah, I'm hoping for the latter, meaning I think that's more realistic, and I think that that would be better. You didn't give the third alternative, which is that we could be set on a path toward a deeper alienation and animosity, frustration on India's part, certainly, and a sense that this relationship simply isn't worth the investment that's been put into it over years. That would be the third potential, and one that I think is really worth avoiding. And so even if we can hold on for that second potential, which is a marginal improvement, holding on for someone else after the fact, that would be great. Because that would preserve the options on the table for both sides, keep the door open for a closer strategic partnership, say in a next administration. You know, if we can do better than that, excellent. But I'm not banking on it right now.
Daniel Markey, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.